Happy New Year and welcome to 2025. And you know what that means? It's time for our Cincinnati Reds New Year's resolutions. I hope you have yours ready.
You are Locked On Reds, your daily Cincinnati Reds podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Reds. My name is Jeff Carr. His name is Steve Offenbaker, and we are lifelong Cincinnati Reds fans. We've been doing this podcast now for 3 years together. I've been doing it for 6 years as well, and Steve's been podcasting for a couple of years outside of this. We've been podcasting a lot about the Cincinnati Reds, and we're glad that you're alongside us here today because Locked On Reds is the podcast for the Reds fan that knows what happened. They want to know why. And on today's show, we're going to discuss why the New Year's resolution for the Reds should be obvious. We'll get into that in just a moment. In a few minutes, we will talk about a rumor that the Reds are linked to a player that, quite frankly, has Steve and me shaking our heads, just in scratching our heads and all kinds of things, like just very confused with. We'll discuss that here in a few minutes. But, of course, later on, we'll get into your questions and comments because we are live. Thank you so much for joining us here on this live edition of the Locked On Reds podcast that is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app today, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Steve, where we want to begin here today.
No. Where we want to begin. Time out. Where we want to begin is OH, baby. That's where we're beginning for me because I am still in Pasadena. I am following the Buckeyes right now. And what a game. What a good time. OH. Okay. You may not continue with your.
So they're going to give Ryan Day a lifetime contract now, right?
Shut your mouth. If he wins the national championship, we will talk about it. Anyway, back to the Reds talk.
Got him. Yes, back to the Reds talk because it's the day after New Year's Day. It's the day that everybody starts getting their life back to normal after the holiday days that was the last couple of weeks. But as we get into 2025, it's clear that the Reds have one New Year's resolution. All other New Year's resolutions should feed into this one New Year's resolution. And it's a New Year's resolution that we said they should have had last year. They should have had the year before. Quite frankly, every year since I've been alive, this should have been their New Year's resolution. And that is hope is no longer a strategy.
Listen, if that's this only resolution and they follow through with it, then I'm all in on it because you know, how many times have we gone through the list, right, Jeff? And you make your way around the field with this team, and there aren't very many players that when you start to break them down, it doesn't start with the words, I hope. You know, you can go quickly. First base, I hope there's somebody that can play that has two hands. Second base, I hope Matt McLean's shoulder is good. Shortstop, I hope Ellie De La Cruz's defense improves. Third base, I hope they find somebody that can hit the ball. Outfield, I hope they have them. You know, like you go through all of these things and it all starts with I hope.
Yeah, I feel like that's been the thing when it comes to how they have operated for so long. But I see signs that they get it. I see some hope that they get this. And that starts first with, of course, bringing in Terry Francona to manage your baseball team. If this team was still operating on hope, David Bell would still be here. They'd still be here saying, yep, he can right the ship. He's been here. He's had a winning season before. He knows how to do that. No, they go get the guy who's done it all. They go get the Hall of Famer who's soon to be up in Cooperstown, and he's going to have his plaque enshrined there. They get the guy who is going to lead this team back to where they need to be. And it's clear, and he has said it from the get-go, and we're going to talk about this a lot throughout the game or throughout today's podcast, but he has said it a lot that the Reds need to improve on fielding. And that's one of the biggest areas of need with this team. But also, I think that he has been a big proponent of the Reds adding their pitching depth that they now have, or at least maintaining with Nick Martinez and then adding Brady Singer. And they're talking to other guys to come in and make their pitching depth better because you can't just hope that these young guys that have injury concerns and haven't hit their peaks yet do all those things and become major league ball players at the same time that you're hoping your team can get to the playoffs too much hope. Terry Francona says, we ain't hoping, we are knowing. And this is how we know. We go get better guys.
I want to drill down just for a second on what you said about the signing of Terry Francona. Now, I've seen the guys that are on the opposite end of that, right? That think, that was just a smokescreen. That was the move. That was the only move the Reds were going to make. And listen, I've been a Cincinnati sports fan all my life, just like you, Jeff. And I get where that comes from in a Cincinnati fan's heart. I understand. We've been hurt over and over and over again. I get where that thought process comes from. Here's the wrench in it. I don't think Terry Francona comes into this situation without some specific guarantees, with some specific assurances. Now, granted, they're not in writing, but there would be nothing more embarrassing for this organization than for Terry Francona to quit and be like, they told me they were going to do this and they're not, and I'm out. So I believe he came with some promises in hand, some guarantees in hand that there were going to be things that the Reds do. I think you're right, Jeff. I think one of his number one requests was you need to stabilize this rotation, because I am not taking over a team that's starting some dude named Lee Brandt and Kelly because you ran out. So for me, I think that was promise number one. I think promise number two has to do with solidifying the outfield. I can't believe for a minute that they're not going to do something. Now, it
Right.
seems with the way the rumor mill is, it seems that it may not be as flashy as we had hoped it was going to be. And we may have to lower our expectations, because really, for it to be as flashy as we thought it was going to be, it would have to be Anthony Santander. They're not currently listed in the group of teams in on Anthony Santander. So it's going to be one of those lower level guys. It's going to be the Randall Grichuk. I'm almost there with it. I can almost say it. Randall might be the guy, and that's okay. The other thing is, we're going to be talking about them being continued to be linked to infielders, right? And, there are some moves that you can make if you add another infielder to this team that involves people playing out of position. So there's a lot to cover today, just in the what we think can be done. But I think that Francona would not have come here if there weren't some specific demands that he made that they agreed to meet.
Yeah, and to follow up on what you're saying about Santander, I was watching MLB Network this morning, and John Morosi was on there talking about the three suitors, and he said specifically the three suitors for Anthony Santander, and he said it's the Blue Jays, it's the Tigers, with the Los Angeles Angels as a bit of a dark horse in the three-team race. Reds aren't on that list, and quite frankly, there's some other teams on that are not on the list that I'm surprised about. Like, I kind of thought the Red Sox would be on that list, but anyway, that's beside the point. The point here is, the Reds aren't in on Anthony Santander like we would want them to be. But I think that that's going back to what you said about Terry Francona wanting some guarantees. He didn't come in here saying you got to spend X amount of money on an outfielder. He came in here saying, get this roster more trustworthy. Give me more trustworthy guys. Give me some guys that I can work with, some track records. We don't have any track records on this roster. We have a lot of guys with a lot of talent, but a lot of, boy, we hope he can reach that talent level at the major league, at the major league level. So I don't believe for a moment that he put a dollar sign on it, but I also don't believe for a moment he came here thinking, yeah, we're good. The roster's fine. We're going to run it back with what we had last year. But outside of even just adding to the roster, the one other thing that I think kind of leads into the hope is no longer a strategy, team health needs to be managed better. And I think we will see just how big a factor David Bell was in that this year. Like, I believe that we will see some things that will let us know just how much David Bell had control over that. If it's something where there is no change and we still see the goofiness, then we'll know David Bell had nothing to do with it. But I don't think that's likely. I think that there was something to that where he was just like, well, so-and-so says they feel good, so, let's let them play. Or, yeah, I don't know. Like, I feel like Terry Francona is going to have a better gauge on how this is going to work, because I don't remember a whole lot of reporting about Guardians teams or Red Sox teams just being overly injured.
Well, I always say these players sometimes need someone to protect them from themselves. And you might be right. Maybe David Bell was not doing that. But listen, Jeff, there's plenty more to talk about as we talk about the Cincinnati Reds and our New Year's resolutions as they relate to them. And we're going to get into all of that coming up next.
Get down to your next live event with Game Time because they've got great last-minute offers. And I'm not just talking about sporting events. You can go to theater performances. You can go to concerts. You can go to comedy performances. All sorts of different things are on Game Time. You just search by the city that you're in. If you're looking for Cincinnati events, they've got plenty of those. If you're going on the road, maybe you're heading up to Indianapolis, maybe you want to go see a Pacers game, Game Time's got you covered with that. I've used Game Time to go to Pacers games. I've used Game Time to go to Cyclones games, used Game Time to go to Bengals games. I use Game Time to go to everything because they've got great last minute deals, and you can find even, some good deals on Reds tickets already. Seriously, go check out Game Time today and create an account by using the promo code LOCKEDONMLB, and you'll save an extra $20 off your first purchase. So you're getting great last-minute deals, and you're getting $20 off that first purchase with the promo code LOCKEDONMLB. What are you waiting for? Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time.
We're talking Reds baseball here today and every day of 2025. We've got you covered for the rest of this offseason, spring training, the regular season, and hopefully we're talking about a playoff run. All right, Jeff, let's get back into this because the Reds not only have not addressed the outfield situation like we have wanted them to, but we've learned now that, as a matter of fact, they were out there trying to sign a second baseman.
Yes, there are reports, and this comes from Detroit Free Press beat writer for the Detroit Tigers, Evan Petzold, who, when he was reporting on the Detroit Tigers signing Gleyber Torres, he mentioned that the Reds were one of the teams that the Tigers outbid. The Cincinnati Reds were linked to Gleyber Torres. Steve, Gleyber Torres plays second base. We just traded a second baseman. Why are we going to go sign a second baseman?
Maybe Nick thinks those are the only players you can sign in free agency. I mean, we don't know. He's
stuck. He's like, I can only get middle infielders and pitchers. That's all I can do. Middle infielder, pitcher, middle infielder, pitcher.
So I'll tell you how this hit me. It hit me that there could be a couple reasons why this is true. Reason number one, they want to move Matt McLain somewhere else. Now, the question is, where is that somewhere else? We saw Matt McLain playing in the outfield in the Arizona Fall League. And according to Matt, direct quotes from Matt, that was only done to get him at bats because there were priority players at his position. Okay, that's believable. But yet there he was playing the outfield, and the Reds need somebody in the outfield, and Matt McLain was a center fielder in college. So there's all those factors. The other move also involves Matt McLain. Could be Matt McLain swinging over to third base because nobody really wants to see Noelvi Marte in the way that he's hitting right now, or Candelario be the everyday third baseman. There's an option there. The third option, the scariest of the three options, is that quietly behind the scenes, they're not sure Matt McLain's going to be ready for opening day. I haven't heard anything about that. Everything that I've heard still says that everybody, including Matt, believes he's on track for opening day being 100%, but it's still a consideration.
Well, and it's going to be about 5-6 weeks until we know, until they report, until they start practicing, until we really get some sort of concrete health report on Matt McLain and where he is. There's still a feeling amongst a lot of folks that watch the sport and know what happens on a year-to-year basis. A guy like him coming off the injury that he had, there's still a feeling not that he would miss games, but that he would probably have to start at DH for maybe like a week, 2 weeks, maybe even a month. And that could be a contingency plan, is that you go get another middle infielder, but then you kind of walk back and say, well, so why wasn't that guy Jonathan India? Why did you trade him if you felt you needed him or you needed another middle infielder? So I think for me, this is more of a hinging bet on they're going to move some other guys out of position. They're going to move, maybe they move McLain to third base and they move Candelario to first, and they just tell CES and Noelvi Marte, duke it out. Whoever's better gets more playing time, that sort of a thing. I just find it interesting, though, Steve, because as much as we can squint and as much as we can look really hard at this, turn the lights down low and squint real hard, turn our head to the side and try to figure out and make sense of this, I can't. I don't understand.
Turn the lights down low. What
You've never
are you
heard that?
talking
You turn the lights off, squint, turn your head to the side. It kind of looks
Hey.
like the thing that you're looking for. Like, that's not what this is. Like, I don't know why the Reds were distracted with this. Why was Nick Krall focusing on this at all? Negotiating with Gleyber Torres at all. This isn't a fit. He's not a great defensive second baseman. The Reds are horrible in the field. Their gloves are bad. Like, there were two teams in Major League Baseball that were worse than the Reds at fielding, and it was the Oakland A's and the Chicago White Sox, two teams that didn't give a crap about what they did last year. And the Reds were supposed to be going for something, and yet they were just barely better than those teams. So they've got to not ignore the fielding side of this. So if you're going to go sign a middle infielder, sign somebody that's got a better glove. But at the end of the day, this doesn't make sense to me. We were joking about is Nick Krall stuck on just getting middle infielders or just getting pitchers or whatever. I think it's also a situation, and some will remember this, of when you went to Blockbuster as a kid and you see all these movies. You're like, boy, I can get that one, I get that one, I get that one. But you took your time deciding, and a bunch of other Jimmys and Joes came up and took the movies before you. And then there was nothing there. You had to go back and, watch Transformers, the movie from 1985. I did that a lot because it feels like that's what Nick Krall's doing. Stop distracting yourself with guys like this. Go get an outfielder.
First of all, there's a whole segment of the listeners right now that are looking at each other going, what the hell's a Blockbuster? So thanks for dating us a little bit. Back in the olden days where we had VCRs, Google it. You'll be shocked.
90s.
There was a comment, and I'm going to go all the way back to it real quick here because I thought it was good from Carrie. If I can find it real quick, Jeff, because it was right at the top. Where'd it go, Carrie? All right, I can't find it, but here's what Carrie said. Carrie said that this feels an awful lot like Nick Krall's lining up pieces in the background in order to have a domino of trades come through to where we end up where we want to be. And that really could be. The moves that we've heard the Reds link to, the players, it's still been pitchers and it's still been infielders. So for me, that very well could be. It very well could be that Nick Krall has a couple different deals lined up, and he already kind of knows what the replacement parts that he needs is going to be, and he's trying to get everything in place. So, I mean, that's a real possibility. I don't think that's very far-fetched.
Before we get to the listener questions and comments, because I'm very interested. I know that there's a lot of folks got a lot of thoughts right now, and I would like to pose this question to the commenters as well, but I want to pose this question to you. Do you trust that that's what's going to happen? Do you trust that that's where Nick Krall is? Because I think before last offseason, we were in that boat. We would trust that that is what's going to happen. But now I'm sort of 6-1, half dozen the other when it comes to this sort of thing. Like, I think it could happen, and I think that he's really good at playing things close to the vest. But I kind of feel like this could be a scenario where he goes and he gets a piece, and then he gets stuck because the other part doesn't happen. And I'm worried that is what could be the case here.
It's a fair worry, but let's remember, we're now just into the first week of January. Not a lot was getting done over the last 2 weeks, really. I mean, I know there were some deals that were signed out there, but
this Torres news was just about it. Yeah.
Right. Just is as in everyone's real life.
Teoscar Hernandez too. Yeah.
The last 2 weeks of January, last 2 weeks of December, things get slower and slower and slower until they grind to a screeching halt the week of Christmas, New Year's. So we're now into the first week of January. Nick Krall, in my mind, has 4 weeks.
Yeah.
4 weeks to get this done.
Gotta get it done in January.
The team has to be structured for the most part before February 1st. So if we reach February 1st and nothing is done, I think that a decision to roll with what you got has been made, and I'm going to be very, 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 very concerned.
Yeah, that's going to be a tough one too, because once you get closer to packing up that truck, people start packing in the roster and they stop worrying about trades and all that other stuff. And yeah, I'm a little bit worried that we're starting to push it along here. And yeah, there was that off comment about Teoscar Hernandez being signed. I am bummed that the Reds didn't get him, but it was clear from all the reporting around the situation that he wanted to go back to the Dodgers, and there was just about nothing that any other team could do to lure him away from that Dodgers situation. Anyway, with all that being said, there's so much to get into, and I know that the comment section's been hopping, and it's that time of the live show that everybody loves. We're getting into questions and comments coming up next. The NFL playoffs are fast approaching, and the best way to get in on the action is over on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new users can place a $5 wager, and if that $5 wager wins, you can get $250 in bonus bets off that first $5 wager. And there's so much to check out, whether you're talking about game lines or point spreads or something like that, prop bets, who's going to throw a touchdown pass. Plus, you can even look at futures for Major League Baseball, just like we keep on doing every single day here at Locked On Reds. In fact, Elly De La Cruz, 20-1 odds to be the National League MVP. Sure, he's in the same league as Shohei Ohtani, but if anybody can beat Shohei Ohtani, it's Elly De La Cruz, and Elly De La Cruz could be an interesting offer there at 20-1 to win that National League MVP. So check him out today. Go to FanDuel.com, and your first $5 wager that wins will get you $250 in bonus bets back. That's FanDuel.com. Make every moment more over on FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. If you cannot watch us on YouTube, remember, you can find us on literally any podcasting audio app out there. Check us out today. Make sure you subscribe. That way you can get Locked On Reds wherever you go, whatever you might be doing. All right, Steve, let's jump into the questions and the comments in the comment section. I know people are happy to be talking Reds here on this January 2nd.
Well, first, let's start with this from Pat Magooch, because thanks, Pat. He says, shout out to Jeff and Steve on their Locked On anniversaries.
Thanks,
yeah,
Pat.
Jeff and I hit 3 and 6 years respectively, and I was doing Reds Alert for 3 years before that. So we've combined for a lot of years of this, Jeff. I think we're getting old. I think that's what that translates to.
Been talking Reds for a bit, but it's been a good 6 years, and looking forward to plenty more.
All right, let's jump into this because, I want to be clear. This from Aaron. The outfielders are disappearing. I think
plus outfielders. So he's talking about the really good ones. Yeah.
So I think as I was kind of trying to hint at earlier, I think top tier outfielders, the splash move, the only one left is Anthony Santander. I think that's not happening based on what we're reading, what we're hearing. Yeah. So now we're into the second tier. So there's still some good ones there. There's some good moves that can be made, but it's not nothing that I'm going to want to go attend a press conference over, Jeff. But a real upgrade could be made.
And I think too, like there's going to be a feeling out there that it's like, well, they didn't get Santander. I'm mad. Like, yeah, I'm going to be disappointed that they didn't get Anthony Santander, but what's the plan otherwise? What happens outside of that? What comes next? That's going to be the important part, is what do the Reds do? Because there are many ways to improve a roster. And quite frankly, I was thinking about this earlier today. I feel like Nick Krall's been listening to us, because anytime he talks to a beat reporter about the plan, he's like, you know what? There are many ways. And you and I both stood on a table at the beginning of the offseason. He said, go get Hernandez, go get Santander. Boom, we're done. And I think that he was just like, yeah, no, that's fun, but there's other moves that I can make. Now, we're going to look at that differently. We're not going to look at a Jerickson Profar or even a Randall Grichuk plus somebody else and say that's as good as if they would have signed Teoscar Hernandez or Anthony Santander. We're not deluding ourselves with that. But at the same time, it's not going to be like, yes, this offseason is an abject failure because they didn't get one of those two guys. It's annoying, but there are still other ways they can do this. And that is where I am hopeful that Nick Krall can do that. I don't necessarily know, like, would you say, and this is kind of what I was getting at earlier, would you say that you trust Nick Krall to get that move right?
I still do.
Okay.
But he's got 4 weeks before he loses my trust. That's really where we're at. So thus far, when he's made a trade, I've been pretty much on board with it. So if he goes out and gets those moves, then I trust that he can get them. Brad says, given all the news about being linked to pitchers and infielders, I don't think the Reds will try to sign an outfielder, Grichuk or otherwise. Will they try and get an outfielder through trade? I can't say that name, Jeff. I need the pronunciation guides. I'm terrible at telling names.
How much wood could a Grichuk chuck if a Grichuk could chuck wood?
Oh, boy.
That's what I'm saying here. And it's like you put together grit and
Stop
chuck.
it.
Stop
grit,
it. Chuck. Yeah.
So that gets followed up by this comment. They need to trade Lodolo now. This is probably the last year that they will get anyone worth anything if Lodolo has another year of being injured. The guy has pitched like 50 innings total, right? So I kind of agree with this. If you're going to trade Lodolo, it's now, because either he goes into 2025 and is the same guy in his value tanks, or he goes into 2025 and he's figured it out and you don't want to trade him. So if there's going to be a Lodolo trade, I think it's now.
Yeah, and it's definitely got to be for an impact guy, though. Like, I'm not trading him just to trade him. It's got to be for an impact major league player. Hopefully a bat. And I don't know what that trade is. I don't know if it's a Luis Robert. I don't know if they could go out and get somebody better, if it's a Brent Rooker.
Well, Brian suggests that they should be on the phone with Baltimore every day. Says that Baltimore has an abundance of cost-controlled outfielders and they could use pitchers. Young pitcher for young outfielder should be a fit for both clubs. What say you, Jeff Carr?
I would be interested to see if that works. I'm surprised that Corbin Burns went to Arizona. I thought he was going to go back to Baltimore. And I wonder if they're still looking more for veteran pitchers than young pitchers. Although they have in the past operated in, young controllable players are better than veteran expensive players, but this is a new ownership group. The Orioles are not owned by the same people that they have been owned by. It's like year 2 now, I think, of their new ownership. So they could be changing how they operate on things. But yeah, I mean, that would definitely be somebody who Nick Krall should be calling on with all the different outfielders that they have. They felt comfortable enough to let go of Anthony Santander. So that's how good their outfield is.
This from Jesse Smith. Perhaps Krall has something up his sleeve. Go with what works, air quotes around works, in the outfield, but sign a big free agent bat for the infield. Thoughts? Would you be okay, Jeff, if they did that? If they went and signed a second baseman, a third baseman that, had some pop, and then the outfield remained Steer, Friedel, Fraley, Fairchild?
It depends, because that list is limited too. The big time bats in the infield with pop are Pete Alonso and Alex Bregman. And I don't know that the Reds are high up on any one of those free agent lists. And I don't necessarily know that there's anybody else out there that excites me. And Gleyber Torres, let's be clear about this. Gleyber Torres was not on the list of players that excited me. So he even said, and I read in the report from the Detroit Free Press whenever they were talking about the Tigers signing him, is that Gleyber Torres wanted a 1-year deal. He himself had a bad year last year. And while his bad year still would have equated to a pretty decent season for some of the Reds hitters, he still felt like he had something to prove before he could really go out and ask for a big time deal. So that's why the Tigers got him for like 1 year, $15 million, like a deal that the Reds could definitely sign, I believe. But I think there was an element of that the Reds were going to be a vessel for him to get a bigger deal next year. This was not going to be a guy that answers a lot of questions. This is going to be a guy that comes in with question marks. That's not who we're talking about going to get.
Kerry and Scott Campbell both are in a similar vein here. So I want to throw both of these comments at you, Jeff, and get your thoughts, because they both clearly think the Reds should be a trade partner with the Detroit Tigers. So this first from Kerry, how about Matt? Is it Vierling? Matt Vierling. He's Matt a good Vierling. Center field, third base guy. Heard he may be tradable. And then Scott comes in with this saying, with the Tigers moving Colt Keith to first base, should the Reds trade for Spencer Torkelson? What say you? The Detroit Tigers.
Spencer Torkelson would be interesting, because I think he's in the same. He's on a parallel track. It's not like the exact same track as CES, but a parallel track where he just hasn't quite been as good as we thought he could be. Like, he was a guy that was supposed to be a franchise-changing prospect, and he hasn't lived up to that potential for the Tigers. So that could be a possibility, but I don't know what it would cost. Matt Vierling, to me, isn't really that interesting. I mean, he had a solid year last year, but before that, he's just been an okay guy. I mean, in 2023, he played 134 games, 2022, 117, 2021, 34, and he was a Philadelphia prospect before he was with the Tigers. He played for the Phillies for 2 years there, those first 2 years of his career. So I kind of view him as a okay guy. Like, before 2024, he didn't have a slugging percentage above 400. So I don't know that I trust that. I think I would need to see another year before I go like, yeah, go get a guy like that.
Carrie asks if it's Veerling, what would it take to get it done? What would you be willing to give up for that deal?
Nicoladolo would be too much for Matt Veerling. That would be a vast overpay, I think. You could probably get it done for, I don't know, you maybe send like a top prospect or something for him. But again, I am
Would
not
you send
in the
one of
camp
the
that I would trade
chases?
for him.
Would you trade
No,
one of the
that's over.
chases?
I would say probably like
Connor Phillips.
no, he's not a top 10 prospect anymore. I don't think he has any trade value. I think that you're probably looking at one of those shortstops. They got like a Tyson Lewis, I think is his name, or Stafura, Sammy Stafura, somebody like that. But I'm not interested in trading for Matt Veerling. I wouldn't do that.
All right, this from your name. Thanks for making them easy for me today, guys. I struggle with these names. Who in the outfield do we have that pitchers are scared to face? No one. That's no bueno.
Who do we have in the lineup?
Well,
I mean, Ellie.
Yeah, I mean, we hope some of them are better. No, look, the outfield, and I'm not going to be a defender of this outfield. I'm not going to try and say that it's great if they roll with the same outfield. But I will say that if handled correctly, it's not as bad as we think it is. I don't think Spencer Steer. I think Spencer Steer is going to have a better year in 2025 than he had in 2024. There are some real questions surrounding TJ Friedel. I don't know who he is. We don't know who he is. Is he the guy from 2023 or not? This year will tell us. And then the outfield God help us, the outfield combination of Fraley and Fairchild in right field might be the most reliable of that bunch right now, because that outfielder, the two combined, the superhero of Fraychild. Hey,
Fraychild, nice.
Fraychild.
Hey.
Like the superhero combination of Fraychild is an outfielder that's 20% better than league average, Jeff. So
why does that sound like a Witcher character, Fraychild?
It does.
I feel like it does.
Someone should be carrying a sword,
that's what I'm getting here. But no, I mean, your name is correct. There's nobody in the outfield that any opposing pitcher would be worried about facing. And while Fear of the Steer makes for a good t-shirt, I don't necessarily know that is the reality right now. I think if he had a batting average more like 2023 with the power output that he had in 2024, then we could be having more of a conversation about that. But he just wasn't the guy that we thought he could be last year. While he hit over 20 home runs, and that was nice, that was about the only thing that you could say about his batting resume that really got you excited. Yeah, the F troop.
The F troop from Debbie Brown. Yeah, I agree.
Really Fairchild and Friedel. Yeah. But yeah, I just think like that's the obvious land of opportunity to improve. But as it stands, Spencer Steer's an infielder that's playing out of position.
Yeah, and your name says with Steer being the most reliable outfielder, that scares them. I agree. There's no, I am not going to rainbow and kittens that outfield group. If that's what they open up with, then it's a total failure of an offseason. I don't know any other way to really put that. I mean, we'll try to make some lemonade out of those lemons, I guess, but it's a failure.
I don't know that I give him an F, but I give him a D. I wouldn't give him any more than a D.
No, it's a failure. They've needed an outfielder for 3 years now, Jeff. It's a failure. There's no spin you can put on 2025, beginning with the outfield group that they finished 2024 with, and say they didn't fail this offseason. It's a complete and total failure. I don't care that they upgraded the pitching staff. They ignored, if they were to go with that same group, they would have ignored the most pressing need of this team for multiple years. That's unforgivable.
What if,
especially in a year that they're supposed to win?
But if the only move they'd make is Grichuk, give him a C. I'm not giving him higher than a C for that.
Sure.
Because he doesn't
So
vastly
yeah,
improve this group.
so you're making my point for me. Grichuk moves you
Yeah.
from failing to, okay, well, you did something. You got an adequate outfielder. You get an adequate grade.
Yeah.
He's not an above average outfielder. You don't get an above average grade, and he's not top tier, so you don't get an A. So you're making my point for me. It's an F.
Right. No, and
they've got to move the needle with an outfielder.
But I don't know. I feel like they've put themselves in a corner here where it's like your next move better make a lot of sense, because every other move feels like a footnote to the big move. And if there is no big move and all you got are footnotes, then what did you do this offseason?
Well, we want the press conference. I want the press conference. You want the press conference. The Reds country wants the press conference of the guy holding the jersey. It's possible to build a division winner with small moves. They did it in 1990 and won the World Series. Small moves. You go out and you get the pieces you need to augment what you've got. They did the same thing in the 70s, folks. The Joe Morgan trade was a move, and that was a blockbuster. That was a jersey press conference.
Well, at the time, people hated it.
People hated it, but they addressed the needs. You can begin to turn the dial, move after move after move, and suddenly you find yourself in a place with a team that can compete. And they can still do that here. There's enough adequate ball players still available via free agency. There are trades to be made where they could incrementally turn the dial and get this team in a position to win the division.
And that's what's so tough about this, is that it's like we want to be able to say this is concretely who they're going to get. It feels like that next move, the big move, is something that's going to surprise us, because I don't think it's Luis Robert and I don't think it's Anthony Santander.
No, I definitely don't think Santander's coming. And I think that Luis Robert, it's too big a gamble for me. It's like, if we were at the casino in Vegas, I would be pushing back from the table going, that's too rich for my blood. Like that's too much gamble there. If I'm not opposed, I've said this before, I'll say it again before someone calls me a prospect hugger. I am not opposed to trading everybody we have in the minor league system. I don't care, but you better get guaranteed reliable return. Guys that have done it before. And Luis Robert does not consistently meet that requirement. He's had one season that meets that requirement and a whole lot of seasons that don't. So which guy is he? Is he the oft injured dude, or is he the guy that put up, all-star numbers? If you just look at how it averages out, that needle points towards oft injured dude. And I'm not willing to pay the whole minor league system for 40 games of an outfielder, and then we're right back where we started without the prospects. You go get me a guy that averages 140 games a season. Now we can have a conversation, and I don't care who you have to trade to get him from the minor leagues, because I'm ready to win right now. I want to win this year. So go make the moves, but get me somebody that's reliable.
There's also definitely a question that needs to be answered about the future of the Reds outfield, because there's just not a whole lot there. Like, I mean, Blake Dunn maybe, but there's not a whole lot of guys that really get you excited about the outfield that are coming up through the Reds system. So whatever move they make this year can't just be a one-year move. It's got to kind of be like a multi-year move. And maybe that's why we haven't seen the Reds make a move yet, because Nick Krall is looking for that move.
Taylor Ward's being discussed in the chat right now, Jeff, and I really talked myself into that move when we talked about it a couple weeks ago. I'd be fine with that. I would have no problem. And he's not going to cost every prospect in the system either. So there's the added advantage of that. You can make that move and still have pieces left over to do something else if it presented itself. So I would be fine with that.
But that is part of the point as well, though. Like, he might have 2 more good years that you're like, really like, yeah, we're happy that he's in our outfield. And then you have a conversation after his year 33 season, because he's 31 years old right now, just turned 31 less than a month ago. So he's going to be 31 for this year, 32 for the next year. Then his year 33 season, who is he going to be at that point? That's going to be the question here, is that it kind of feels like if you get a guy like Taylor Ward, or Randall Grichuk is a guy that's in his 30s as well, you're still looking for the future guy. Who's the guy that you can hinge your outfield on? Or are you constantly going to be turning over your outfield and making it a, free agent flavor of the year type guy?
Well, at some point they're going to have to burn a high draft pick on something besides a pitcher or a shortstop, right?
Maybe.
That's
Yeah.
really what's going to have to happen. And really, I think what we're seeing right now with the lack of outfield that you're describing is a result of that. And it's just a simple fact because the Reds can't afford to go out and buy free agent pitching. Not really good free agent pitching. The Reds could never go out and sign a Hunter Green on the open market.
Or a Corbin Burns.
Yeah,
or something
Corbin
like
Burns.
that. Yeah.
It can't be done. Cincinnati's never going to do that. Not as long as the Castellinis own this team. So they're going to have to draft those guys. It's much easier to go out and sign some free agent parts. We're waiting for them to do that in the outfield. We've seen them do that with the rotation. We've seen them do that with the bullpen. So for me, what we're seeing in the minor leagues now, the Reds have a real tendency to overcorrect. We don't have any pitching, so now we have all the pitching. We don't have any of this now. And as a result, there's no catchers and there's no outfielders. And they're going to have to address that. They're going to have to draft some of those guys and make an attempt to grow their own.
And a quick thing, and this is just a quick thought because I remembered him, but he didn't really do a whole lot last year. But a guy that I'm really going to be watching within the Red system this season is Carlos Jorge. He made the move from second base to center field, dealt with a lot of injuries last year. What's he going to look like? He's a super dark horse. This is not anybody that is saying Carlos Jorge is who the Reds are hinging their future outfield on. That's not the case here, but he could be an interesting dark horse option. So I'm going to keep my eye on him this minor league baseball season.
Zero way. Fun fact: Bob Castellini's net worth is almost half of what Juan Soto is going to be making. That's why baseball is in trouble right there. All right, let's get a few more of these in here, Jeff, before we call it a day on this beginning of 2025. Thanks everybody for being here and joining us as we kick the year off with this live. Looking real forward to continuing to talk Reds baseball with you guys every single year. You know, one of the guys, this from Nick. Do we think that Hines will fix holes? We don't talk about Rhys Hines a lot. I don't know who he is yet, but I did like some of the things I saw. I did like that suddenly he seemed to be able to take the ball the other way a little bit. Now, was that because he was overmatched by major league pitching? I don't think so, because when we did see him get around on a few. I hope that he maybe learned something. I hope that he picked something up, and I'm going to be real interested to see. I think he starts in AAA. I don't think he's really a contender for the big league roster right out of Goodyear, but I hope that he goes down to Louisville and we see a lot of Oppo tacos. We see a lot of stuff going the other way, gap shots that because that makes him dangerous. If the fielders have to play him straight up and he can punch the ball out to all fields, he's in the conversation for some big league playing time.
Well, and I'm going to push back on you just a little bit on this because we had an episode a couple of weeks ago where he was segment one, where he was like our top story that we talked about. And like, could he be a guy that the Reds could maybe rely on? And the whole point of what we said was, I think if that happens, they're not relying on him till at least June, maybe May, if things have gone really bad in the outfield. But he's not a guy that should be in plan A. He should be plan B, maybe even plan C, if you want to make that argument. But he has shown so much talent and he intrigues me. And I feel like there is something here, like a tiny sample size, 46 at bats. You don't know much about a guy at that point. But in those 46 at bats, his average exit velocity was the same as Elly De La Cruz. His sprint speed was in the top 8% of Major League Baseball, and he had a whole lot of really good quality of contract metrics. Now, the things that stunk were his plate discipline. You can improve plate discipline if you work at it, and I think that he is a guy that can work at that. Plus, he has been a guy that has been rated by scouts and stuff like that as having a plus arm. So we're talking about a guy who could fit and could fill the hole in the corner outfield that we're looking for. It's just he has a lot of work to do with that. I put him in the same vein of, I don't know, like a Blake Dunn or even Will Benson. Like, it feels like those guys are they could help the Reds, but the Reds should not be relying on any one of those guys as the answer currently. They should go get the answer here in the offseason. And then these guys are in the periphery. If there's an injury or if there's just random opportunities that come up and then all of a sudden they go crazy, then maybe let's see what they've got more then. But I like Rhys Hines' personally, and the different things that he has shown, but I don't know that I can trust that stuff just yet because it's only been 46 major league at bats.
This from Ben. Not that I believe he will, but I'd bet on Blake Dunn making an MLB impact long before resigns. What do you think about that?
Different profiles. They're both fast, but Blake Dunn, I think, is actually a little bit faster. And Blake Dunn can play center field. So there's definitely an opportunity there, especially if we see more injuries to TJ Friedel and the Reds don't get a center fielder this offseason, which is what I would like for them to do. But there's not a whole lot out there as far as center field is concerned. So there's probably still more opportunity and a quicker path to getting that chance for Blake Dunn than there is Rhys Hines, but both are very talented. They're just different in their profiles. Blake Dunn is never going to be a power guy, and that's kind of where Rhys Hines is going to make his bread and butter.
Right. Jimmy McFarland says Rhys will run into more home runs. Let's end with this, Jeff.
You didn't have to get
I can't
lucky.
remember.
He's just got a big swing.
I can't remember who posted this. It might have been our buddy Ken over at Obscure X Reds, but I can't remember who posted this. But question: who finishes with more career home runs, Rhys Hines or Aristides Aquino?
Well, see, I always get in trouble when I close that out. Let me see what's Aquino's numbers.
I don't have them in front of me, but
is home run numbers. Obviously, we won't look at anything else. So Aristides Aquino's career home run numbers 41. Rhys Hines. Rhys Hines is going to have more than 41.
You believe he'll get more than 41? I do too. I was just curious because it's very easy to lump those two players together based on their initial debuts. Now, Rhys didn't get as much opportunity as Aristides did in the his first month or so in the big leagues, but both of those stories have a similar feel. You show up at the big leagues, you're not expected to do much, and you start mashing the baseball, right? Similar beginnings. But I think Rhys Hines has much more potential to be a longer term outfielder than Aristides Aquino did.
And I'm trying to remember the situation in which Rhys Hines was called up. Wasn't that when Fraley was dealing with his illness?
There's nobody left. It
was like a situation where it was a short period of time where they're like, okay, after a couple of days, we're going to be back, but we just need somebody for right now. But then he spent that short period of time just going off and hitting home runs every other at bat. And so they're like, okay, well, we got to keep this guy up here and keep him rolling. And then he stopped rolling. And then he went like 1 for 36 or whatever the huge slump that he went on following that first week of just absolute pandemonium. He just completely disappeared. So there's an element of this where it's like, was he ever really going to be a guy? But I think that he's got the profile that they should at least give him more of a look. He should get more than 46 at bats. And I think he will grab on to at least have a solid major league career and do better than Aristides Aquino did.
All right, Jeff, I think that is a good spot to go ahead and wrap up this New Year's edition of the Locked On Reds podcast. Thanks, everyone, for making us your first listen every day. Go check out the Locked On MLB podcast with our good buddy, Paul Francis Sullivan. He'll even let you call him Sully. He has you covered on all of the happenings nationally in Major League Baseball, and he's kind of a super funny guy and a great storyteller. You won't be disappointed. Go check him out. If you want to listen to it, we made it easy for you. The link for his show is in the description of ours. Just go down there and click it. Until next time, we're going to continue to gather up all of the news, the rumors, the information, and bring it back right here to keep you locked on Reds every single day.
Turn the lights down low, squint real hard, turn your head to the side.
Turn the lights down low.
You'll see exactly
what you want to see. There, I had so many jokes, but Hannah would have been mad at me.